The lesson topic of this video is operations on polynomials. So there are three operations we are going to talk about in this video, and that is addition, subtraction, and multiplication. So addition of polynomials, what we have here in the first example, we're going to add the polynomials and we're going to simplify completely. What you see is a polynomial of 4 terms right here. This is a 4-term polynomial. We have 3x to the third, plus 6x squared minus 8x plus 7. And we're going to add that to another polynomial, which is this, negative 4x squared minus 10x plus 9. When we add polynomials, really all we need to do is combine like terms. And in fact, because this is addition right here, we don't even need the parentheses that show up. So the first thing I'm going to do, and you don't have to do this in your work, but it might prove helpful, is I'm going to rewrite this without the parentheses. So 3x to the third plus 6x squared minus 8x plus 7 plus, we're going to add all the terms of the next set of parentheses, so plus negative 4x squared minus 10x plus 9. Now, like I said, all we need to do is combine like terms. Remember that like terms have the same variable part. So if we've got an x to the third power right here, we have a 3x to the third. If we have any other term with an x to the third power, it can be combined with this. As you see, we do not have any other x to the thirds, so that's the only one. So I'm going to just write 3x to the third and move on. So the next term in this is plus 6x squared. Do we have any other x squared terms? Yes, we do. We have a negative 4x squared right here. So what is a positive 6x squared plus a negative 4x squared? Well, that is 2x squared. So plus 2x squared, because positive 6 plus negative 4 is 2. Now, the next one, let's see here. We have a negative 8x right here, and we have another x term, negative 10x right here. So negative 8x's plus negative 10x's is negative 18x's, so negative 18x. And lastly, we have a 7 that's positive and a 9 that's positive. So together, 9 and 7 is 16, so we have plus 16. Now this is simplified completely. Don't make the mistake of thinking that any of these terms can be brought together because they all have different variable parts. Okay, the second example is subtracting polynomials. This is the one that, if people make mistakes of the adding or subtracting, this is the one that people make mistakes on because they forget that this subtraction right here means that this entire polynomial needs to have this entire polynomial subtracted from it. So this subtraction sign right here, we need to make sure it means that we're subtracting this term, and we're subtracting this term, and we're subtracting this term. So what we really have to do here is, and the word that we sometimes use is distribute, we need to make sure to distribute this negative to every term. And what it really is a negative 1. But if you just think we need to make sure that each of those is the opposite of what it started out as, because that's what happens when you multiply by negative 1. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite my entire problem again without parentheses, but making sure that I distribute that negative. So now I have negative 4x to the third plus 4x squared minus 8x, so none of that changes. And now we need to do minus negative 16x to the third. So minus a negative becomes plus, so plus 16x to the third. And then we need to do minus negative 10x squared, so subtracting a negative will become positive again, so plus 10x squared. And then we need to do minus a positive 9. So subtracting positive 9 means minus 9. Now this problem is exactly like the one on the first example we did. We're just combining like terms. So first we have negative 4x to the third. We have another x to the third term right here. So we have negative 4x to the third plus 16x to the third, which will be 12x to the third, because negative 4 plus 16 is 12. Now, next one we have plus 4x squared, and we also have a positive 10x squared. So together, that makes plus 14x squared. All right, now we have a negative 8x right here, and notice we do not have any other x terms. A very common mistake is to combine that negative 8x with this negative 9, because you're like, oh, now these two go together. But they don't, because this does not have an x with it. So we just write negative 8x, and the last thing we have, of course, is this minus 9. And that's alone as well, nothing to combine with it, so minus 9. Again, this is fully simplified. All right, so the third operation we're going to look at is multiplying our polynomials. So this first example, example A, says 2x squared times the polynomial in the parentheses, which is 3x to the third plus 5x minus 9. What we need to do here is we need to make sure that this 2x squared gets multiplied by every term in the parentheses. So you know of this as distributing. We're going to multiply that exterior factor by everything in the parentheses. When we do this, I'm going to write it out. I'm going to write every piece out and then show you how we're going to simplify using our exponent rules. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 2x squared times 3x squared. I'm going to multiply this times this. So I'm going to write that as 2x squared times 3x to the third plus, I'm going to multiply the 2x squared times the positive 5x. So I'm going to go ahead and write that as 2x squared times 5x. And then this minus sign, minus, this one right here, comes right here, right? And then we're going to multiply our 2x squared times negative 9. So 2x squared times negative 9. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify the red, and then the purple, and then the orange. So the red is 2x squared times 3x squared. What that is just a whole bunch of multiplication. So we can do 2 times 3, which is 6, and then we can do x squared times x to the third. Now remember, that means we have base of x times base of x, so we add the exponents. So x to the fifth plus 2 times 5 right here. 2 times 5 is 10. And then we have x squared times x, so base of x, base of x. We're going to add their exponents, so 2 plus 1 is 3. So we have x to the third. That's a 3. And then minus, in the orange, 2x squared times negative 9. So we can multiply the 2 and the negative 9, and we get negative 18 and x squared. Now we're almost done. I'm just going to ask that we simplify this minus a negative 18x squared by changing that to plus. So my final answer is going to be 6x to the fifth plus 10x to the third plus, because minus a negative, 18x squared. Again, we cannot combine these because they're not like variable parts. All right, example B, 3d minus 4 squared. Now this is super important right here, you guys. A very common mistake is made right here. Many people want to say that 3d minus 4 squared is 3d squared minus 4 squared. It is not. You cannot do that. That is not okay. We cannot just distribute a square into a binomial situation. Binomial meaning two terms. We cannot do that. It is not correct. It will never work. So we have to avoid that mistake all the time. What does it mean if I square something? It means that I multiply it by itself. So if I take 3d minus 4, and think about multiplying it by itself, I would multiply it by 3d minus 4. How do I multiply 3d minus 4 times 3d minus 4? Well, we use FOIL. We've talked about that in class before many times. FOIL means multiply the first terms, then the outside terms, then the inside terms, and then the last terms. So multiplying the first term times the first term, so that's 3d times 3d. That will be 9d squared. 3 times 3 is 9, d times d is d squared. Okay, and then we multiply the outside terms. So the outside term is 3d and negative 4. So what's 3d times negative 4? Well, negative 12d. And then the inside terms, so these are the inside terms, negative 4 times 3d, so that'll be negative 12d. And then the last terms, negative 4 times negative 4, which is positive 16. Now we're going to simplify this. 9d squared, there are no other d squareds, so we're just going to write 9d squared. Then we have negative 12d and negative 12d, so that will be minus 24d. And lastly, we have just the plus 16 right here, so plus 16. Okay, I'm going to show you one last example, example C, and then I'm going to go ahead and ask you to try example D on your own and check your answer. This one's pretty important to give you an example of, though. I'm going to use a new method or a different method of multiplying this binomial, 2 terms, by this trinomial, 3 terms. It's called the matrix method. I'm going to use this rectangle. I'm going to break it up into 2 columns because I have 2 terms here. And I'm going to break it up into 3 rows because I have 3 terms here. I'm going to write each of my terms in a spot. So what I mean by that is I'm going to write an x here and a negative 3 here. So this x goes here, negative 3 here. Then I'm going to write x squared here. That's x squared. And 2x here and negative 5 here. So again, this goes there, that there, that there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply these 2 terms and put my answer here. I'm going to multiply these 2 terms and put my answer here. And these 2 terms here, these 2 terms here, and so on. All right, so x times x squared is x to the 3rd. X times x squared. And x times 2x is 2x squared, 2x squared, because x times x is x squared. X times negative 5, this will be negative 5x. Up here, negative 3 times x squared is negative 3x squared. Then we've got negative 6x here. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. And lastly, negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15. Now we're going to combine our like terms in each of the squares of our little matrix. So this is an x squared, x to the 3rd. There's no other x to the 3rds. Okay? This is 2x squared, and this is negative 3x squared. Those are like terms. I circled them both in blue. Now I've got negative 6x, and I've got negative 5x, so I circled those in orange. And lastly, I've got a 15. It doesn't have anything else that it's like term with. And now we can simply write our final answer. So we've got an x to the 3rd right here. Then we've got a 2x squared and a negative 3x squared. If I combine those, I get negative 1x squared, so negative 1x squared. The orange circled items, negative 6x's and negative 5x's makes negative 11x's. And lastly, we have what's in green here, 15. So we have multiplied the binomial times the trinomial. Go ahead and try D and then check back to see how you did. Okay, so you should have got this answer here.